The recreation prototype is, well, it's coming on. It's looking more untidy because there's more stuff on there, which is good. We've got the same keyboard and PCG 850 gadget thing here, which is really just a way of mounting the blue pill, and an OLED display here. And then at the top here I've got an adapter PCB for a flex connector and a DC-DC converter here, because this OLED display here requires 12 volts, which is a bit inconvenient, but there you go. And this does all work. I've got down here SD card, so I'm thinking of putting SD card storage in here. So instead of having non-volatile memory, you just store your programs on SD card and be done with it. And then that's also removable. You could take that out, put it in a PC and transfer data and so on. And then down here I've got a battery, so I'm thinking run the thing on batteries, maybe. I think the OLED display is going to take too much power really to run it for a huge period of time, but I'm thinking rather than having it completely tethered, run it off battery. Maybe put a real-time clock in and have an RTC in there as well. I don't know about that, but obviously that needs to run off a battery. Unfortunately, the ST32-103 or the STM32F103 family, they've got a real-time clock, but unfortunately it doesn't store the time on the battery. There's a bug in it apparently. So that means you need an external real-time clock, and so I might do that, I might not, I'll think about that. But I've also got down here some MOSFETs doing power switching, so you can plug the USB in and it switches off the battery supply, and when you pull the USB out, the battery supply gets switched back in to drive the processor. The real-time clock supply will be directly permanently wired onto there. So at the moment the code that's running on here is code that just drives that OLED display. Can't remember why. I was doing something with the firmware. I think I was fiddling with the SD card or something, and I didn't want that on. For some reason the libraries conflict, so you can't have both running at the same time, which is a bit of a pain. But in the final recreation it will be this OLED display here, which is white, and it was the only one I could find really that fits in the display sort of recess in the case. So that's about it. It's a little bit small, so it isn't going to go fully left to right, and unfortunately because of the spacing it may have to be a little bit off centre as well, so not really ideal, but at least I've found something that will do the job. Being an OLED display, it's going to be quite power hungry. Unfortunately I couldn't find any sort of sharp memory LCD type displays that would fit, which is a shame. I was thinking of putting a bigger one in and only displaying part of it, but there's various hardware inside the case, which means you just can't do that. You'd need to put part of the case through the display, and that's that's not going to work very well. So I've gone for this OLED display at the moment. If I can find another one that is better, I might fit that in there, but this one should work. I've got it running in this circuit, and the only problem is it needs this 12 volt supply. Well, and the other problem is that being an OLED, it takes a fair amount of current, a lot more than something like a sharp memory LCD or just an ordinary LCD. So that means running off battery is not really going to, well, it's not going to last very long on 2032 or something like that. It'll last a while, but the best thing would be to run it obviously off USB. So you could run it off a USB battery pack or something like that, and you'd have battery life of days, I should think, of a large pack. But obviously it's not as portable as the original 502 was. But then, well, not really sure I'm too bothered about that. I mean, it's just sort of the challenge of making a recreation. I'd probably put the battery in like I did on the CQ1 recreation, just because it is then recreating what the original was. But on that one, that had the same display, so that was fine. This one, I'm not putting the same LCD display back in, so can't really run it off the same battery and get the same battery life when you're using something that takes a lot more power. But anyway, yeah, so the SD card as well, instead of using the module that I normally use, I've realised that you can actually wire an SD card directly to an STM32 F103 blue pill, and you can talk to it directly. You don't need the power supply. It runs off 3.3. They're designed to run off 3.3. So the regulator that was on there was a 5 volt to 3 volt. So you can just ditch that because we're running at 3.3 anyway. And you can ditch everything else that's on there, the level shifters and stuff, and just talk directly to the card. So the footprint is greatly reduced. It comes down to just basically that shiny metal bit there. And makes it a lot more convenient putting an SD card inside this fairly small case. I mean, a module like that, that's just not really going to fit, so I can't really do that. But being able to talk directly to it, that is almost certainly going to fit in there somewhere. So that's good and different to what I normally do. So that's been trimmed down a bit, which is nice. I mean, I've used these a lot all over the place. I've had a bit of trouble with them because I wired them up to 3.3 volts originally, not 5. Some of them worked, some of them didn't. So I've had to put mod wires on things, unfortunately. But being able to run it directly like that, I mean, that just makes it so much easier. The only problem is I'm going to have to find a decent footprint for it. But quite pleased that I found that. So I bought a load of these connectors. So that's probably what will go on the board. But yeah, so the whole thing's up and running, and I think more or less that is the entire circuit. I don't think anything else other than maybe a real-time clock, but that'll be I2C and pretty easy to plonk down on the board. I probably won't even bother prototyping that. And the next step will be to start looking at turning this into a PCB that fits inside the case. I've had an idea about the 601, 602 problem with the switches in the different positions, and I think what I'm going to do is create one PCB which has a snap-off area, one there and one there, or maybe just one here, so that when you fit it into a 501 case, you snap off that part of the PCB and solder the battery contacts in. But if you're running in a 60 something case, then you don't snap it off, and that has the contacts for the switch, which is over here. And then down at the bottom I make the PCB so that you can always run with the 602 battery contacts, which are on the back of the keyboard. So I think one PCB with a snap off area up here will actually mean that you can put that one PCB into both arrangements of case. Well, that's the idea anyway. So it's going to be fairly challenging fitting it all in there, I think, because it's completely different hardware going into the case. But anyway, we'll see how we get on.